welcome to the TDS Talking Early Years podcast. Now, each week we'll be joined by educational experts from across the globe who offer exclusive insights, some inspiration, and a lot of guidance that helps practitioners unlock the potential for learning in the early years. Welcome to TTS Talking Early Years with your host, Alistair Bryce-Clegg, and today I am joined by Ben Kingston-Hughes, and we are talking about all things play. Now, in the last episode, we talked about the importance of imaginative play, but in this one, Ben, I want to dig a little bit more into the importance of physical play. And again, physical play is something that a lot of practitioners are a little bit wary of. And it would be good for us just to unpick at the very beginning what we mean by physical play and how you've seen it work really effectively.
Yeah, so I do a lot of physical play, obviously working with vulnerable children. If you can get them on a hot sunny day running around being superheroes, it can be genuinely life-changing for some of our children. And it's where we see a lot of magic happening, the tree climbing, the running around in the woods. So when we focus on physical play, we tend to make it much more about the joy of movement rather than it being the kind of who's the winner, who's the fastest, who's the best. We're not opposed to competition in childhood because, of course, that is part of play and children are competitive. But we tend to be much more about the just running around in the sun being silly. And it's inspired by the adults. If you've got adults engaging in physical play, the children will want to join in. And one of the problems with that is that, again, you've got adults who are naturally good at that. And so they naturally gravitate towards physical play. The children look at them and they see those fit, young, those kind of sports coach type. And that's nothing against sports coaches, but there are children who don't have those other role models in their life who are not looking at those and going, oh, I could do that. They're actually looking at that and going, that's not me. So what we're trying to get across to people is that if you're like me, I'm really short. You probably can't see this on the screen, but was absolutely rubbish at sport all my life. I was terrible. And I was quite lucky, actually. I got into sport in when I was about 18, 19 years old, and now I still do. I play badminton for a team, I play squash, but when I was in school in the 70s, it was football, rugby, and cross country, and I was terrible, all of those things. You can tell it was the 70s because our PE teachers would hide in the bushes on the cross country run to make sure you didn't cut corners, and you could see their cigarette smoke just wafting up from the bush, so you knew.
I have a very similar story.
So I think we've got into the habit now of seeing adults as role models, and they are all the sports stars. They're the Usain Bolts and the Ellie Gouldings of the world that are just amazing at sports, and we need to reclaim it back for the ordinary people who are not ever going to beat Usain Bolt in a race. Like, my legs are too short. I think that's for us. It's about getting everybody physically active, and you do it through play rather than through sport more.
And there's lots of interesting research as well, and for adults and for children, about what happens when you are able to play or move in that kind of gross motor physical way, especially if you're doing something you enjoy. So you get a nice endorphin release. You're using your body physically, so therefore your blood is pumping, you oxygenate your blood more, so therefore you've got all of this kind of buzz around exercise. If you then accompany that with something you really enjoy doing, we also know that children play differently outdoors than they do indoors, so it tends to be more physical, tends to be louder, they tend to play further away from the adult. So a lot of children, especially boys in research, enjoy outdoor play because it allows them to be safely distant from an adult, which gives them a sense of independence. They're way more likely to take risk in an outdoor space and safe risk as well as not so safe risk, because the outdoor space allows that to happen. And when you take risk, again, you get that release of adrenaline and endorphin. So there's an awful lot of good chemistry that happens in your body when you're in that kind of outdoor play.
Yeah, I mean, risk and challenge is a whole different topic, but it is, when you're experiencing risk in an outdoor area, when you're jumping off stuff, climbing trees, you're actually producing cortisol, which is really bad for you, but it's actually the only safe time it is to do so. And weirdly, children build up a tolerance to cortisol so that in later life, they can actually cope more with what is genuinely a dangerous hormone. And they do it by pushing themselves that little bit more, by jumping a little bit higher, by going a bit faster on their trike or their bike, by, pretending there's a crocodile in the cracks in the pavement. And because they're doing it through play, the other biochemicals of the brain balance that out. And it actually is genuine. It's like Roman emperors used to ingest small amounts of poison so that they wouldn't get assassinated, to build up a tolerance. That's what children are doing every time they jump out of a tree. They're building up a tolerance to cortisol, intrinsically potentially linked to their mental health in later life.
And there is some research that talks about children in teens, early teens, when you have quite a lot of those big risk-based decisions to make that you haven't had to make before. Children who've had more opportunity to do this kind of physical play and have that cortisol management make better judgments just because they're used to, or they're better at making kind of a risk assessment because they're just used to doing it.
Yeah. We do a lot of really genuinely dangerous stuff with teenagers, because a lot of research was saying, in terms of their well-being, in terms of their mental health, but also in terms of lowering antisocial behavior in certain areas of the country. If you put on like properly risky, challenging stuff, like we used to do fire jumping, we did fire skipping. You can get a skipping rope that's got paraffin in it, and it's an arc of fire. Yeah. When you're a teenager, they've barely any fear, but even that was making even them go, whoa. And of course, I've got to do it myself. I'm in my 30s at this point thinking, I'm going to die. I've got to do it. So yeah, it's something we've done a lot in my career, just because we know how effective it is. So yeah, and outdoors, when you've been in this business a while, sorry, I'm not saying that you're old, but
no, that was a very subtle way of putting it, but yes, I have.
But we've always known that outdoors is good. Yeah. I think now though that it's way beyond that. There is so much research, from the biochemistry that you're talking about to the mental health stuff to the life expectancy stuff that's coming out. Yeah. Actually, it's essential, and there's no excuses anymore. We know children learn better outdoors. We know that if they've been outdoors, they learn better indoors when they come in. We know that children respond in terms of their eyesight to natural light better than artificial light. So we're currently in the middle of a short-sightedness epidemic because so few children are going outdoors. So there's no excuses anymore.
And that has a lot of impact for indoors as well. I know we're talking about physical play, but the idea that everybody tends to cover their windows with various wallpaper of paintings or tricky words, whatever it may be, but actually the natural light is really important. But also you see way less instances of antisocial or non-compliant behavior in outdoor play, depending, and we've talked about this in episode 1, again, some settings I work in, that outdoors just feels like indoors with the roof taken off. So there'll be tough spots, there'll be a maths area, there'll be a malleable materials area, there'll be a writing table in the outdoor space. Whereas I think what we're talking about are outdoor areas that really embrace the uniqueness of being outdoors. And for me, I often talk about the difference between outdoor play and indoor play that you've taken outside. And whilst there's a place for indoor play outside, you need to really foster an ethos of outdoor play in the outdoors as opposed to indoors brought outside.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes you might be in an environment where that's harder. You've got to bring the natural world to the artificial as much as you can, and you've got to use that space. And that's something you and I both do when we work in schools, isn't it? That we try and maximize the outdoor space. And it's about, and again, it's about the adults freely experimenting. So I got into the physical play stuff because I've always been really bad at very fine motor skill stuff. So, arts and crafts or whatever, that's not me at all. I've always liked the really big stuff. So I like building giant things out of cardboard boxes or huge dens. And it's because I've got shaky hands. It's not medical. It's just weird. I've always had shaky hands. I've never been a brain. But so that I gravitated towards, and I always thought big, because I can't really do, like doing a jigsaw drives me insane. I couldn't do that. And I don't know if it's my ADHD or whatever, but it's the big stuff. And I've seen that really gets through to some of our children. They don't see the world in small. If you're doing a mathematical exercise with tiny little blocks, they're not seeing it. But if you've got huge pyramids out of cardboard boxes that 14 foot tall, that's where you see them suddenly engaging. And I think that's the key, is that there are children who don't thrive indoors at all. We've gone off from physical activity, haven't we? But simply do.
And there's a whole kind of science around the fact that if you are in an outdoor environment and you can have Tupelo to construct with, or in an outdoor environment or an indoor for me, and you've got big cardboard boxes and tubes and crates, the physical act of moving, the spatial awareness, the interaction you've got to have with other people. There's so many more things that you can gain from that larger scale physical movement, which leads us nicely onto, again, a point I was talking about the other day when we were talking with a setting about the behavior.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting word, behavior, that's a whole other podcast, of the children indoors. And I said to them, well, we're talking about 3 and 4 year olds. So I said, describe to me a typical 3 and 4 year old. I had to use adjectives to describe, and they're all things like busy and loud. And I was like, okay, now look at your indoor space where for you, your children spend the majority of their time. How can I be typical? Again, if there's such a thing, how can I be a typical 3 or 4 year old in this space? Because all the things you've described to me are like big physical movement, loud voices, opportunities to do all that physical stuff. So there is also an opportunity to reflect as practitioners on our indoor space and say, right, we know that children benefit from physical movement. We know that typically at this age and stage of development, this is what children like to do all the time. Why do we give them indoor spaces where they constantly have to sit down and be still, and then wonder why groups of children who are less compliant then begin to demonstrate those more antisocial behaviors?
Again, none of this is rocket science. It's, we've gone way past the point where, children, they seem to behave a bit better outside. No, we know it's concrete. We've got so much evidence about children were not supposed to be indoors for long periods of time. That's their brains are much more comfortable when they're outdoors. And so, of course, it's going to reflect in their behavior. Nobody likes to be forced into something that you're not comfortable doing. So that's, if you're 3 or 4, or if you're 18 or 19, if you've got space to be yourself, and we take children with extreme behavioral issues, we take them out in the woods because they can do what they want to the trees. They're not going to complain. And just the contextual behavior. So if you're shouting and you're loud in a classroom, you might get into trouble. But if you're shouting loud in a forest, it matters,
absolutely.
doesn't it? And we barely get any behavioral problems, and not because we're experts, simply because we've taken them outdoors into an environment where they can feel safe and they can explore, and it's a massive impact on behavior.
The culture of education that we've got in lots of settings still, where compliance is regarded as being a skill. If you're a really good practitioner, you can get them to sit quietly, or you've got children who sit on the mat or wherever it may be with their arms folded, their legs crossed with their back straight, and sometimes even in early years with their finger on their lips. That idea that is going to then produce a child who's open, ready to listen, inquisitive, resilient, it's just bizarre given what we know. But yet it's the culture of where we've come from, this kind of concept of best practice. Whereas actually I worked with a setting in the Lake District where when their children came in, apart from the fact they took their shoes off and they were allowed to have like slipper socks or slippers on, but when they had a gathering on the carpet, the adult just said, right, come and make yourself comfortable because I want you to listen and they were like on bean bags, they were leaning up against each other, they were lying on their front on the floor, nobody was like, sit up, cross your legs, and they were the adult was good, but they were captivated by what was said. It was brief, and then they went off into this physical space, but that's also a space that's got a climbing wall in its book area, and they've got a water wall where the children take their shoes and socks off and step into like a shower tray and hang buckets, and so it's all very physical.
Amazing,
the work that they get in that space and the result they get from the children is properly amazing.
Weirdly, I've just written an article about exactly what you're saying, and it's about how we focus on skills in children that actually have no place in the adult world. So sitting up straight, I don't know about you, as an adult, I've never been made to sit up straight. And there's actually, again, it's the neuroscience. There's filters in your brain that if you're not comfortable, there's a filter called your affective filter that filters information away from your upper brain, which means you don't learn as much. So if you're being made to sit up straight, cross-legged, for instance, some children find that comfortable, others don't. If you're one of children like me who can't sit cross-legged, never could, you're actually learning less. So why are we doing this? Why is sitting up straight a priority when it's never going to be used in adult life? And in fact, I've recently been, I've got a psychologist on my team, and I was discussing this with her about them not being able to sit up straight. I've never been able to sit still. And she said, and I don't know how much of a thing this is, but she said, you might have a floppy core. From neurodivergent children. It's not a middle-aged man condition. It's basically.
I've heard the term before.
I cannot sit up straight. It's not that I'm being, badly behaved or I'm being slovenly or whatever. It just means I can't. And when you make me, I learn less because the filter in my brain as it's a survival trait, focuses more on the source of discomfort. Why do we make every child wait to go to the toilet till the break when we know that sitting there needing a wee fundamentally undermines learning? Why do we make children, line up to go into a classroom when in adult life you never, ever do that?
And you know that how you feel about learning is way more impactful than anything you ever learn. And if you get into a culture of every time I come to the carpet, I'm uncomfortable. Every time I need a wee, I can't go. Every time I have to go anywhere, I line up at the door. You begin to associate learning with all of those negative emotions. So the minute somebody says, right, carpet time, immediately your brain clicks into, I don't like this. I'm going off for a big poo now.
Some lovely research by a lady called Dr. Judy Willis, and she's looking at joyful approaches to education. And she's looking at all the way through, right, up into secondary school. And it's backed up by multiple neuroscience studies that shows actually if they're enjoying it, they're learning. I know it's an old cliche, but it is genuinely true. And it's to do with all the filters in the brain. If something's unpleasant, you focus on it more because back in cave people days, you've got to deal with it before it becomes a threat. If something novel and interesting and fun, you focus more of your brain's resources on that task. And it's just really simple neuroscience. But my daughter said the other day, she says, we get made to line up outside the class. She's 12. We get made to line up outside the classroom, boys on one side, girls on the other. She says, and we're not allowed in the classroom until we're all quiet. So we lose 15 minutes of every lesson and you would, wouldn't you? And I said to her, well, they're probably trying to prepare you for life. And without missing a beat, my daughter went, yeah, in prison. And I was thinking, if a 12-year-old is saying that. But I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some amazing teachers in schools where the children are fully into learning. I work with award-winning teachers who just love learning themselves, so the children love it. But it is. I
think, fundamentally, there is a culture driven by, and again, a whole podcast on its own, but we've got a very outcomes-driven education system. Even at the end of foundation stage, you've got to achieve those early learning goals, and you will be judged by your ability to achieve them or not. And a lot of the achievement of those goals, like the reading, writing, maths, are often taught in a way that is very sedentary, whereas actually, when you look at what the science tells us about children and child development, our policy and curriculum would be very different if it matched what children needed. But therefore, we just have to be a bit subversive in what we do as educators and use research and use what we know. Doesn't always have to be research. What your gut tells you. If you're sitting on the carpet, bored witless and having to manage behavior, the universe is telling you it's time to get up and move and do something else.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. It's about the myth that if you give children a positive experience or you focus on the kind of the process, you actually lose an outcome, and you don't. We now know, this is fact backed up by multiple studies that say that if a child is enjoying the experience of learning, they will learn more automatically, but also they'll explore more, they'll use more curiosity to investigate and create more. So it's just about that confidence to give children the time to be children, like you've said, to actually just be 3 and 4 year olds or be 6 and 7 year olds, but at the same time focus on the experience itself. And I think, you and I as trainers, we this is something we both do, is that for a fact that if you've got a group of adults that you're working with and that they've enjoyed the experience of having you teach them, then they will apply it in practice. Even if they've only learned two or three things, that's still more effective than if they've hated every second of it, but you've tried to teach them 20 things. And I think it's how we both train, is that we've accepted that if you don't enjoy the experience, you won't apply that learning. And if that works with adults, surely it works with children as well.
Absolutely. And again, that's an excellent way to end this episode. Thanks, Ben, again, for some fascinating insights. We could have talked all day.
Can I say one thing?
Go on.
I can't remember. I think when I was thinking of athletes, I think I've suggested that Ellie Goulding, not Ellie Simmons, was the...
you did say Ellie Goulding, but we just had it pass.
But
who knows what Ellie Goulding gets up to in her spare time?
I know, my brain froze, but it was Ellie Simmons. I was trying to say, as an Olympic swimmer, that I couldn't beat in a swimming race. I probably couldn't beat Ellie Goulding either, because I'm... To be fair,
on stage, you'd probably need to be super fit. But yeah, I was just going to let that one pass, but now you've brought it up again. Okay. Thanks for that, Ben. Don't forget to join us and Ellie Goulding in the next episode, where we are going to be talking about humour and the important role that humour plays in play. So for now, Ben, thanks very much indeed.
Thanks a lot.
I'd like to say a huge thank you to our guest today, Ben, for joining us and providing such valuable insights into play. You've been listening to the TTS Talking Early Years podcast with me, Alistair Bryce-Clegg, and Ben Kingston-Hughes. And if you've been inspired by our conversation today, then don't forget, you can sign up via the link in our episode notes and be the first to hear about future episodes and also access exclusive follow-up content, which will include ideas for your settings and lots of links to relevant resources.